Hello! Today I'm going to build a healer that will be good for most beginner players. If you're only familiar with healers in some popular online games where they just run around and heal, 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 and you think that sounds boring, this is not that kind of healer. This healer will be out in the thick of battle, breaking skulls with everyone else. This healer is going to be made to fill a few important roles in the group. Their primary role will be to keep people in the fight and bring them back if they go down in battle. But because of the way I'm putting this build together, this healer will also be able to share the frontline tank role. Let's get started. I'm going to build it all the way out as a level 1 character, then show you how the character progresses through the levels. I'm going to make a solid healer. I'm going to keep it fairly simple. You get a lot of things thrown at you up front in this game, so I want to build a character that you can play while you learn the basics, but at the same time, not give you a bad character for the sake of simplicity. Lastly, I'm going to try to stick to the cliches and stereotypes so you know what they are and you can see why they work. From there, you can decide where you want to go. Either stick with the cliches or break the mold. If you have questions, hopefully this video will answer most of them. If not, you can leave a comment and I'll try to help you out. If you ask most people that enjoy Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition or 5e where you should start, they're likely going to tell you to start with a character concept. You can think of a movie, show, or comic book character to base your character around. Or you can think about how you would write an interesting character in a medieval story or gothic novel. Or you can just make it all up anyways. For the concept of this character, I wanted to make them feel compelled to help people. I also wanted to have a character that is figuring out their spirituality and who they are as the game progresses, instead of having their whole identity written out for them. Even though they have a backstory, when you start to play this character, they have their whole life ahead of them. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you'd like to see me build more characters. First, we're going to choose our class. Many Dungeons & Dragons sources have you start with the race, and that's fine. But if we're going to choose our role in the game, I think the first place you should look is your class. I think the best class for a beginner to make a healer with is Cleric. The reason we are going with Cleric is because they have some of the best healing spells in the game. Even though there are other classes with healing abilities and spells, the Cleric is definitely the best known for being a healer. Clerics are also capable in battle. One thing that makes the Cleric great for a beginner is that, unlike other spellcasting classes, they can change their spells every day. They don't have a list of spells that they know. They ask for spells from their higher power every day depending on what they think they'll need that day. That being said, this will likely be the most complex build for a beginner character that I'll make a video for. So if you want your first character to be a Cleric, be prepared to keep track of more things on your character sheet and spend more time leveling up than other beginners in your group. Next, we're going to start putting numbers in abilities. Since I can't know what you're going to roll, I'm going to use something called the standard array, which is a set of numbers that the designers of the game decided would be pretty average for rolling. The standard array gives you a high number, a low number, and a variety in between. Later, I'm going to convert these ability scores into modifiers. If that sounds confusing, don't worry, it's not. Just keep in mind for later that only even numbers convert. There are a few exceptions, but in general, odd numbers don't do anything. So here is the standard array from highest to lowest. We have to assign each of these numbers to an ability. These abilities need to support our concept in both combat and role-playing. If you're thinking to yourself, geez, I'm not even 5 minutes into making this character and I already have to put numbers that I don't know what they do next to words that I don't even know what they mean in the game. Don't worry about it, just follow along. Even if you don't understand when I'm done, everyone understands eventually as they play, level up, and make more characters. I like to start with the highest number first. The most important thing clerics can do is cast spells. I'm going to place the 15 in Wisdom. This ability will power your spells and some abilities. Also, in Dungeons & Dragons, Wisdom is your ability to perceive things, gain insight, or resist someone's ability to manipulate your mind. If your physical health gets you out of bed and gets you to work, your mental health lets you do your job and do it well. That's what this Wisdom score will do for us. It will help us stay mentally in the game. I find it most helpful to place the lowest number second. That way everything just kind of falls in the middle. That said, the 8 is going into Intelligence. Unfortunately, something has to get the low score. Your least important ability is called a dump stat because you dump your lowest number into that ability. Even though being knowledgeable about things like religion and history would seem very important for a devout worshiper, it's really not important for the roles you'll be filling in this game, so it's getting dumped. Besides, role-playing as a bit of a dunce can be a lot of fun and much easier than trying to role-play a genius. Okay, I got the high number and the dump stat. Now let's work our way down, highest to lowest. So I'm going to put the 14 in Constitution. With a higher Constitution, they'll get more hit points at every level and have the fortitude to resist things like being poisoned. Also, clerics get some spells that last a long time and require you to make a concentration on them, even when you're getting hit. So if you're going to have a high Constitution, you'll be able to focus better and keep your concentration. Next, we have to assign 13 to something. Let's put that in Strength. You're going to be mixing it up a bit with the enemy. You only get so many spells and you're not going to want to use them all on the easier fights. So you're going to want some strength to hit harder, carry more, and climb and jump while wearing your inconveniently heavy armor. Also, when your meat-headed fighter is having a bad day with the dice, you'll be the backup to open heavy doors, bend bars, and open pickle jars for dear mother. After you get that pickle jar open, we're going to have to assign the 12. So let's put that in Charisma. This probably isn't the optimal choice for combat, but we do need something else that provides some help in dealing with personal interactions. Churches and religious types show up all the time in D&D. Having a religious type in the group that can be persuasive or charming when interacting with priests and clergy will be a benefit to the group. That leaves the 10. Through deductive reasoning, you already know the 10 is going into Dexterity. Dexterity is tied to a lot of important things in the game, like your ability to dodge attacks and how well you shoot. But we're going to find ways to get around this totally average score in Dexterity with armor and spells. And you're a healer. There's nothing wrong with giving yourself some health after you take a full blast of a fireball or a dragon's breath. That will probably happen, just saying. For our race, I chose the most cliché race in the game for a cleric, and that's the dwarf. I chose Hill Dwarf for their extra durability. They also get a +2 to Constitution and +1 to their Wisdom. As you can see here, I've added a 2 to my Constitution, bringing that up to a 16, and I've added a 1 to my Wisdom to make that a 16 as well. I've also converted the scores into modifiers, and this is why odd numbers don't do much for you. When you have a 10 for an ability, you get a 0 for a modifier. For every additional 2 points over 10 you have in your ability, you'll get an additional +1 to your modifier. For every 2 points you have under 10, you get a -1 point for your modifier, like in Intelligence. Strength is the one ability it's okay to have an odd number in for 2 reasons. First, some armor requires that you have a certain strength to be able to wear them, and the numbers that the creators chose for the armor are odd numbers. Second, the distance you can jump with a running start is your base strength score in feet. So every point counts when it comes to jumping. We're going to work our way through the rest of the Dwarven Traits now. In the game, gender doesn't have to take a role, but since I'm going for a little variety in my builds, I'm going to make this character a female. If this is an issue for you, you can change the gender. It's not going to have an effect on how the character functions in the game. Her name is Syrah, which is kind of like Sarah. That seems dwarfy to me, and it's easy to remember, right? Her age is 40, which isn't too much into adulthood for a dwarf. She is lawful good, so always trying to follow the rules and do the most good. She's 4 foot 3 inches or 130 centimeters and weighs 170 pounds or 77.1 kilograms. In general, you want your character to be on the light side of normal for their race. This is because when you ride animals or cross rickety bridges, your weight is going to be taken into consideration. With her weight, I wanted her as small as possible for this reason. Weight in the game is based off pounds, but you can consider them units if you're more familiar with the universal system of measurement. Same with distance and speed. Just think of them as units. To explain the speed, I'd have to explain combat, and I'm not going to do that right now. Just know that a normal speed is 30, but since dwarves are short and stout, their speed is 25. For a language, dwarves can speak Common like most everyone, and Dwarvish. Dwarves can also see out to 60 feet in the dark. They resist poison. They can use battle axes, hand axes, light hammers, and war hammers. Cira will be proficient with smith tools, and she knows a little bit about stone cutting, so she'll get double her proficiency bonus when making a history check involving the origins of stonework. For her background, she's an acolyte, so she spent some time in a temple doing clergy duty and learning about her religion. This time she spent as an acolyte gives her the insight and religion skills. She learned Celestial to read religious texts and Goblin because dwarf and goblin territories sometimes overlap, and ministry has no borders. Before she left the temple, she was given a holy symbol, a prayer book, incense, vestments, common clothes, and 15 gold pieces. As an acolyte, she gets some perks when visiting a temple of her faith, most notably giving a place to shelter and healing if you provide the material components needed for healing. Sometimes local priests can hook you up with the skinny, the local lore, or confidential intel. If you're faithful, the gods will get your back. Now we're going to get into your class. This is the part that is really going to give you the body to fill your role as a healer and give you the tools you need to fight. At first level, you'll get 8 plus 3 plus 1 hit points. That's your max die roll plus your constitution modifier plus 1 hit point for being a hill dwarf. Clerics also get light and medium armor proficiency and can use shields. They can use simple weapons. They can add their proficiency bonus to their wisdom and charisma saving throws. I'll get into saving throws later. Cira will also take 2 more skills, history and persuasion. Her proficiency bonus is 2. At first level, you get to choose between some equipment options. Here I've already made the good choices for Cira. On top of her acolyte swag, she'll grab warhammer, some chainmail, a light crossbow and bolts, and a shield. She'll also start with an explorer's pack so you can get around more or less comfortably. All of your equipment weighs a total of 132, and your max carry weight, which is 15 times your weight, is 195. This isn't a video on how to play D&D 5th edition, but because you're a beginner, I need to talk very briefly on one set of rules of the game before moving on so you understand what I'm going to talk about next. It's the attack versus armor class rule. It's fairly simple. Everyone in the game has an armor class. The armor class is usually a number between 10 and 20. When you say you want to attack someone, you'll roll a 20-sided die and add a number or two. We'll get into adding numbers in a minute. If that number you rolled is equal to or higher than the AC number, then you hit them. Roll your damage, and the DM subtracts that from the target's hit points. Same if they attack you. They roll, add modifiers. If they meet or beat your armor class, then they roll for damage, and you subtract that from your hit points. In the next slides, I'm going to show you what your attack roll will look like and what your armor class is going to be. In the gray text, you can see the calculation for how to get the attack and damage numbers. When you see something like 1d20, the D just means die or dice, and the number like 20 tell you how many sides the die has. The number before the D tells you how many dice to roll. So 1d20 is one 20-sided die. In the black is the total attack and damage where I've done the math for you for each weapon. So when you attack with your warhammer, you'll roll 1d20 for your attack roll and add 3 to try to beat their armor class. If you meet it or beat it, you'll deal 1d8 plus 1 damage. With your crossbow, you'll add 2 to your attack roll and do 1d8 damage if you hit. The range on your light crossbow is 80/320. The first number is the distance you can shoot before you attack at disadvantage. Disadvantage is when you roll 2d20 and take the lowest number. For most combats, the range will let you shoot across most of the battlefield. The second number is your maximum range, so you can't hit anything beyond 320. Since you don't have a Dexterity modifier, you don't add anything to the damage roll. But don't worry about it, your ranged spells will do plenty of extra damage. Here I show you your armor and your total armor class. This is the number they have to meet or beat to hit you. As you can see, an 18 is pretty high. At low levels, even if a bad guy has +3 to their attacks, the odds are they'll only be able to hit you 3 out of every 10 times under normal circumstances. Most low-level enemies will only get about 3 to 6 attacks in a combat, so you're looking pretty tanky. At first level, Cira will get to cast spells. She knows 3 cantrip spells and can cast them as many times as she wants per day. But for any spells of first level or above, you'll have a limit as to how many times you can cast them per long rest. Her wisdom modifier is 3 and her cleric level is 1, so she'll know 4 first level spells. Spells work the opposite way that attacks do. The normal weapon attack you roll to see if you can beat their armor class, but spells, they work so the person defending against the spell has to roll a saving throw and beat the caster's difficulty class, known as a DC. Cira's spell DC is 13, which is 8 plus her proficiency bonus plus her wisdom modifier. That's okay for first level, but it will need to improve later if you want her spells to work against tougher enemies. At first level, clerics get to choose a subclass. Out of these 8 options, there's one subclass that really stands out for healers, and that's the life domain. With the life domain, Cira will get some of the best options and abilities to heal her comrades. For starters, she'll get heavy armor proficiency, domain spells that are always prepared, and the Disciple of Life ability. Whenever she uses a spell to restore hit points, they regain 2 plus the spell level additional hit points. The first domain spell she gets is Bless. She blesses up to 3 characters of her choice within range. The creatures she chooses add 1d4 to their attack rolls or saving throws. This spell really is a blessing. Even though she has to concentrate on it, she'll get a lot of use out of this spell. To cast this spell, you'll need to be able to speak, use hand gestures, and use a material or spell focus. Those things are verbal, semantic, and material, usually shortened to VCM, as you can see in the components section. Cure Wounds is the low-level bread and butter of the healer. Cira can heal 1d8 hit points plus 3 for her wisdom modifier, plus 3 for Disciple of Life. She'll average 10 hit points of healing, which is near full health for first level characters. This spell is good for right after the battle. You can bolster an ally to get them to the next place you need to go. At first level, that could mean your next battle. I'm going to briefly go over the spells I've chosen for her. She knows 3 cantrips. Once a cantrip is selected, you cannot switch them out, so I'm pretty careful when I choose cantrips. That's why Cira has Guidance, Sacred Flame, and Thaumaturgy. The first cantrip is Guidance. This spell lets someone add a d4 to a skill check. When you're not in combat, or blatantly trying to influence someone, you should be spamming this swag like you were giving out Halloween candy. Next is Sacred Flame. At low levels, this will probably be your go-to ranged attack. Enemies can sometimes make good dexterity saves, but this should hit more often than if she used a crossbow. Plus, radiant damage is pretty good because there aren't too many creatures that take half damage from it. If you'd like to seem possessed, or you want to have a room feel haunted, then Thaumaturgy is the spell for you. They're small tricks, but they're not illusions. You actually cause loud noises or make the ground tremble. It's mostly theatrics, but there are some practical uses if your DM is understanding. If I were DMing, I would probably let you gain advantage on an intimidation check if you set it up right with this spell. You prepare spells of first level and above after a long rest, which is usually once a day. The great thing about clerics is that you can change your list of prepared spells after every long rest. So the spells I give here are just recommended spells that she should normally have prepared. For first level spells, I'm going to start with Detect Magic. This is a great spell that someone in the party should have. It does exactly what the name implies. When she casts this spell, she can see faint auras produced by magic. If you're in a room full of stuff, you usually can't take it all with you, so you want to cast this spell to find the magic items and leave the junk. You can also see if someone has a magical effect on them. You can also tell what school of magic it is, but it won't identify specifics. What's also fantastic about this spell is that you can cast it as a ritual, which means if you take an extra 10 minutes to cast it, then it won't cost a spell slot. Guiding Bolt is what you wish Sacred Flame was. It's a ranged attack that deals radiant damage, but it deals 4d6 instead of 1d8. Its range is 120 feet instead of 60 feet. You make a ranged spell attack instead of them making a spell save, and the next attack against them gets advantage before your next turn. You can also upcast this for more damage, but I wouldn't, because if you miss, then you've just missed with a higher spell slot. Healing Word is what you wish Cure Wounds was, but with less healing. It has a range of 60 feet instead of touch. It's a bonus action, so you can take an action and still use this, but it only heals 1d4 instead of 1d8. However, you still get to add your Wisdom modifier and Disciple of Life to it, so you'll average 8 hit points instead of 10. This spell is best used in battle when an ally goes down and you need to get them back up and out of harm's way. Sanctuary is the last first level spell I'm going to look at. It's an extra layer of protection for someone not actively engaged in combat. You can cast this on someone who is just buffing their allies or a bystander you're trying to protect. If a creature targets someone with Sanctuary cast on them, they need to succeed on a Wisdom save before they can roll their attack. If they fail their save, they have to target someone else or do something else. But if a person with Sanctuary tries to harm an enemy, the spell ends. In the bio, I like to cover the background and class and why they chose it or why their class chose them. I also like to elaborate on their alignment. These are explanations for Syrah. Syrah is an acolyte because a tragic event made her want to immerse herself in religion. She chose to be a cleric because she studied her religion and now she wants to use it for good. She's lawful and good because she is regretful about her past and wants to stay on the straight and narrow. Personal characteristics are additional ways to flesh out your character. They help you get to the core of who they are and how they act with a few sentence synopsis. I usually look at the options given in the background and handpick the ones I think work for my concept, or I'll modify them to fit even better. Occasionally, I'll just come up with my own. For her personality, she'd say, I see omens in every event and action. The gods try to speak to us, we just need to listen. For her ideal, she always tries to help people in need, no matter what the personal cost. Syrah keeps strong bonds with friends in spite of their crudeness and bad influence. But she has a bad habit of talking about inappropriate topics or gore around the dinner table, and she needs her daily scriptures. Without them, she may find herself falling back into her old ways. I'm going to set up the foundation for her background here. When you create a character, it's usually a good idea to talk about the people closest to them: parents, siblings, best friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, etc. This way, the DM has a way to motivate you to do something or give you help by bringing them into the game to help you. For Syrah's early life, she grew up with two loving parents. Her father, Andwar, worked in the mines, running water channels to ensure fresh drinking waters throughout. Her mother, Dinah, made the best cakes in the mountain. As a child, Syrah was well behaved, but as she grew into a young adult, she became defiant and reckless. Her closest friends were often unsupervised, starting fights and shunning responsibility. Around the time Syrah reached adulthood, Andwar became very ill. For over a year he battled sickness, sometimes spending weeks bedridden. When this condition began to let up on him, Andwar and Dinah took a much-needed trip to tour the ancient parts of the mountain where he suddenly collapsed and died. The death of her father caused Syrah to spiral into depression. At first she handled the denial with many nights spent drinking ale until she blacked out at the tavern. One morning, after she had passed out in the doorway of her mother's house, she was found by a childhood friend as she was passing by. Her friend Desiree was a devout cleric. Desiree picked her up off the floor and brought her inside. She made Syrah tea, laid her hands on her, and prayed for healing. Within a moment, Syrah felt the hangover subside and the weight of depression lifted from her. After tears of joy came tears of guilt. Was she a person her father would be most proud of? No. With a little persuasion from her friend, Sierra found the inspiration she needed to go to the temple and find a purpose in her life, healing others and saving lives. Sierra spent 2 years studying in the temple. The course was unforgiving and the schedule was rigorous, but she pressed through. Rather than pressing on with her education, she felt compelled to begin helping others as soon as she could and start her newfound life as a cleric. If you're just making a level 1 character, then she's done. You have everything you need to fill in the blanks on your character sheet. If you want to see how the cleric progresses through the next few levels, then keep watching. Let's take Sierra up to 2nd level. At every level, you get to add more hit points. As a cleric, the rules let you either roll a d8 or take the average. I'm going to take the average and add my Constitution modifier and Hill Dwarf hit point to 10 more hit points for a total of 22. Sierra will get 10 hit points every level unless her Constitution is raised. At 2nd level, you'll also gain the ability to channel Divinity. Channeling Divinity is like a bonus spell that you can cast. Once per day, Sierra can either turn undead or preserve life. If you use your channel Divinity to turn undead, the undead affected by this will try their best to turn from you and get away from you. This is a lifesaver if you and your party are getting swarmed by an army of low-level undead. It's almost as good as destroying them all. When you channel Divinity to preserve life, you get a pool of 5 hit points at 1st level that you can divide up however you want among people close to you, as long as it's no more than half of its hit point maximum. If you're certain you're not going to be turning undead that day, go ahead and fire this off, especially if someone drops to 0 hit points. Every cleric level you gain, you get another 5 hit points in your pool. You get 1 spell at 2nd level. So for this spell, we're going to take Command. You speak a 1-word command to a creature you can see within range. If the target fails its Wisdom saving throw, it follows the command on its next turn. Some typical commands and their effects are approach, drop, flee, grovel, halt. Really, it's whatever your imagination can come up with for 1 word. Then the DM has to figure out how that creature would interpret that command, as long as it isn't directly harmful to them. Let's take Sierra up to 3rd level. That's 10 more hit points for a total of 32. At 3rd level, Sierra is going to drop the command spell and get 2 2nd level spells. She'll take Aid. When casting this spell, she'll get to pick 3 people near her and raise their maximum hit points by 5 for 8 hours. They'll also get 5 hit points. The 5 hit points isn't a big deal, but the increased maximum hit points can be significant because you can heal up to 5 hit points more through spells and short rests, and maybe get an extra 15 or 20 hit points throughout a day. Of course, when you get access to higher spell slots, then you can get more out of the spell too. The 2nd spell is Calm Emotion. When Sierra casts this spell, it can do a few things. In a 20-foot radius sphere, it can remove charmed or frightened effects. It can also remove hostility from creatures under certain circumstances. I chose this spell for her because I'm just imagining a paramedic being in the back of an ambulance and their patient is scared or angry because they're hurt, and the paramedic just casts the spell and the patient is just cool as a cucumber after that. In D&D, it's not likely going to be like that. You're probably going to cast this on allies that are running scared of a dragon, or a village chief who sees all newcomers as hostile. Either way, it's your way of saying, calm the down, and it actually works. Let's take Sierra up to 4th level. She will get 10 more hit points for a total of 42. At 4th level, you get to choose between an ability score increase or a feat. For Sierra, I chose an ability score increase. I'm going to increase her Wisdom score by 2. This will empower her spells by boosting her save DC, damage dealt by spells, and to hit points healed by spells. The maximum ability score is 20 with a few exceptions, so an 18 is good and no one would blame a cleric for getting their Wisdom up as high as possible. The last thing Sierra will get at 4th level is another prepared spell. Silence is a versatile spell that doesn't allow sound in a 20-foot radius sphere. It can be cast as a ritual, has a long range, and only takes verbal and semantics to cast. If you have an enemy spellcaster cornered or otherwise immobilized, You can cast this in an area and he probably can't cast his spells. If an enemy is using thunder damage against you, you can cast this around yourself and become immune to thunder damage in that area. Another use could be if there's some kind of an alarm that you can't circumvent or a prisoner you don't want screaming for help. You can cast this in an area to shut them down. Well, that's all I have for this video. If you liked it and want me to keep making more, you can donate to the channel via PayPal. Thanks for your support, and please feel free to comment below on things you'd like to see in future videos. If you thought this video was helpful or think someone else could use it, be sure to share it with them and hit that like button. And if you want to see more parties built one character at a time, subscribe. That's all for my video. Have a good game.